All right. So with that, I say welcome to the August 16th, 2021 meeting of the Energy Advisory Committee. I'm Jamie Paquette. I guess I'm still technically the acting chair. Misty, our current chair, still unavailable to join us. So I will just be helping to run things here for today based off the agenda that we have, which starts with public speak. So I know we have the other four members of the committee present, plus Mayor LaChapelle and Cassie from the Department of City Planning. I don't see anybody else from the public, but imagine we can skip over that. Then we're at 6:03, so I think we're good there. So first of all, I want to say thank you to Mayor LaChapelle for joining us. Thank you as well, Cassie. I know we're scrambling a little bit with some of this stuff, lots of things happening. It's August, so lots of people are on vacation or returning from vacation, and yeah, not the ideal time for in-depth discussions of things, but I appreciate everyone for being here. The next piece that was on the agenda for tonight is the Honeywell Energy Services Performance Contract, of which we've had some information shared, some things going on with the City Council Finance Committee. We've been able to look through some of the presentation that Honeywell gave to the Finance Committee, the PowerPoint, as well as the video presentation of that. And I know that that we have some thoughts and questions based on that, but I thought maybe Mayor LaChapelle, maybe it's best for you to start real quick and just kind of take us through things from your perspective. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I mean, the Honeywell, the ESCO process became more interesting to me and beneficial for the city really because of COVID and air circulation issues. It's a way for us to get on top of those things. And the idea is to upgrade what we can, or more detailed, instead of band-aiding, do something a little more than maybe a tourniquet in some of our public buildings. So we're not dealing with emergency repairs. And there's also an opportunity and benefit for the city to add to their solar capacity. The DOER program that we've entered, we finished the RFPs. We actually had 4 really great proposals, and we went with Honeywell mostly because of their the references that we got from how they dealt with a smaller city and a smaller project compared to others. And we are in the initial, like, Honeywell came back with a $12 million, list, or a $12 million spend proposal based on audits and different things. And, it is what it is. And myself and Michael Owens and DPW went through that list, and we decided there was about $6.1 million worth of work that would benefit the city and be worth the time, especially in this bonding environment. So I'm asking for a bond request of $6.4 million. 309 of that is a contingency that hopefully we won't have to spend.
Be 3 million of that 6?
No, the contingency is $308,000.
Okay.
5%.
Got it. Thank you.
So I have, so I put the request forward to bond up to the total amount. The idea is that we probably will not bond for that entire amount because of other money available, but the request needs to, I have to show the state and the city council and the residents that we're committed to paying for the whole project. There are still a couple of components of the project that we might not be able to go through with, and we're ironing that out, but I'm going forward with the proposal of the 6.1.
Okay. When you say the other money that might be available, what does that consist of?
Cannabis money, ARPA money, and the state is refunding or funding again MVP. And, these are, all of those funding sources aren't necessarily, do we want to, or can we, like cannabis money, that we could not reasonably relate this whole project to cannabis money if we had $6 million of cannabis. So it'll be a patchwork. And we're told that there are other grants that could help fund this type of a guaranteed contract of savings, but I've not seen it. So we're on the lookout for that, but that's kind of where we're outside of the scope of this particular project. We need to go out and bond for the end of the school project. So there's an additional in financial incentive to do a bond rating only once, and then do a 2-series bond offering, Series A for education, Series B for energy. And money right now, bonds are really reasonable. This is also the other thing I'll just note between the two. So the school money will be, it's a part of the debt exclusion, but the money for the ESCO is not debt exclusion. It's assumed by the general fund budget.
Okay, I was going to ask about that, right? So it's not anything that's subject to an override or anything like that. It's just kind of, right. It's kind of what I had heard, but what I thought. I don't know if anybody else has any questions on the bonding or anything. But.
Yeah, and I think it's clear, but maybe it's not. So this project, other municipalities have taken advantage of this program. This is not a project. The $6 million that will be paid will be covered by the energy savings. So roughly half of it is solar, and the other half is really deferred maintenance and kind of hopping that up the schedule. That makes more sense for the city because those capital items around air circulation, venting, some HVAC work, they weren't on our capital plan, which goes out to 2025 right now. We're working to push it out to 2026. We were going to roll the dice and see what breaks first. So we kind of can hopscotch, and again, Greg Nuttleman and his crew at DPH helped us kind of figure out what we should do and what we shouldn't do.
Okay. So because you mentioned before, there are some like guaranteed contract savings, I guess, but as you said, it's not the goal is not, the $6 million doesn't get covered, doesn't get paid for by the work that gets done fully. Obviously, there'd be some savings in there. So I guess, is that part of like the DOER program that this is under, that just like the goal is what, for increased efficiency, increased resilience, and is it you mentioned HVAC specifically and some of that circulation air quality stuff. Was that specifically what DOER was after as well? Yeah,
that was a part of it. The program is, kind of allows you to pick and choose in a narrow kind of way around efficiencies. The non-solar part of this project, it gives us some savings, maybe 30,000 or so a year. That is dependent on if we go through with all of those parts. There's a part of this which does some upgrading and improvements to the high school. And we want to talk to the school if they want to do that or not. And a legal question, if capital improvements, is this considered a capital improvement or not? And does the school committee have to vote on it? Which at this point, I do not know.
Okay. So then at this point in the process, it's been through, it's been discussed at the city council level where they've pushed it to the finance committee for discussion and approval. Is that correct? So that's kind of where we're at.
Yes. So I brought forward a broad proposal on June 16th into council. It was referred to the finance committee. The proposal then got further narrowed down. The cost went down. and Chairman Riss brought it back to City Council and referred it back to Finance with the final proposal and the numbers, and that's the meeting tomorrow.
Okay. Does anybody else from the committee have a question about sort of process or background information at this point? Not quite yet on the specifics of the proposal. Anything else in there that we want to know about or cover? All right. Then I know that we've circulated some stuff.
I'd like to say what I think has come up in past meetings, which is just that I think we ended up feeling sort of left out of the process, and feel that as the Energy Advisory Committee, we would have liked to advise on this energy-related project. I had sent some emails to Zoe way back and trying to find things, and then it just seemed like somewhere we fell out of the loop and the project moved forward. And so, just to have a sense of why that happened and what we could do to communicate better and be more in the loop and on the radar and more useful to the city in our advisory capacity. It's water under the bridge, but it's still the thing that we could try to learn from and improve on and make ourselves more useful. The city benefits from the expertise of the people on this committee. So,
agreed. A part of that was when we talked about it some time ago, there wasn't interest, and I totally understood that it was more of, I don't want to say a frill project, but like this isn't a priority right now. And what put me into high gear, understandably cutting this group, as you said, out of the loop was COVID. And we weren't going to get enough CARE Act money or ARPA money to address the air circulation issue. And that was pretty clear. This is a way of a guaranteed savings. Along when I sat down with our auditor and treasurer, no money is cheap, but this is a pretty cheap way to do it long-term for the city. And with the shifting priorities in the city and where we've cut elsewhere in the budget or, combined, we can handle this payment in the budget. I can cover this general fund expense and the cost that, you don't really see, but with, with maintenance, it would help. I mean, the other is, along with the circulation, I mean, they're combined, their interest is also just in a municipal budget, there's so little we can control, right? Commodities and labor and whatnot, you can have an impact on your utility bill. So that was the other of how would we afford the improvements to have a better quality air and circulation, and then also with the solar, we would save money.
Can I ask a question that I just want to make? You just talked about savings and being able to see these kind of savings. Just to be clear on the money, though, we're talking about $3 million. We cut out the solar out of it. We're talking roughly $3 million, and we're having $30,000 worth of savings a year.
Absolutely. And that has to do with what I mentioned before, that half of the $3 million that's not connected to solar is a way for us to cheaply do some catch up on deferred maintenance and the original systems we have and the very poor air quality that exists in public safety, as well as City Hall. It's work that should have been done. It's work that needs to be done now. It's one of the reasons why City Hall during the heat of the pandemic was closed for a whole bunch of different reasons. But one of the reasons why I pushed for it to be closed until July 1st was this particular, is for the numbers to go down.
One thing you had mentioned when we were talking about this before was with the solar, you said something about a payment from Eversource, because we had talked before about how with our current systems at Oliver Street and Deerfield, we're obligated to buy up to about 3.5 million, 4 million kilowatt hours a year from them, and we have to net meter that to them. And our current city usage is around 4.5 million kilowatt hours. So one of the concerns we had even just with those two existing solar systems was if we were to have a really sunny year and we were also to have more energy efficiency improvements, we could actually be low, not have enough energy, which ironically, not have enough energy consumed to fulfill our contracts with Oliver Street and Deerfield. So that's why I was confused a little bit when you said something about it was taken care of by a payment with Eversource, because it really has nothing to do with Eversource. It has to do with our third-party contracts with those solar developer facilities. I don't know if you could expand on that a little bit.
Sure, right. So the energy with the plan before you now, we could go net negative and not meet our obligations and need that much power. I think that's what, the thing with the Eversource is that we have, I'm going to get the terms up here. And John and the Honeywell team are prepared to speak to this tomorrow.
Because I'm assuming John and Honeywell, they evaluated our total consumption.
They did.
With our existing obligations with contracts with other solar facilities and all that?
They did.
Okay.
So Eversource has approved the validity and the request to change the credits to a check payment. And it's allowed specifically, and why it's helpful to us is it's based on Class 3 net metering, which the Oliver Street landfill still falls under. John has another call with Eversource for more detail tomorrow. Just to make that more explainable, other than, to people who are on this call who probably definitely understand it more than I do. Because that was one of our questions jointly, is that both Greg and I were under the assumption that we could not add more solar to the city because of what you just stated.
The issue, though, is Oliver is a very small fraction of this whole equation. The biggest problem is the other Deerfield solar facility. They take up a huge amount of share that we've committed to ensuring, without breaching their contract, that we're going to fulfill and be able to absorb. The Oliver piece is a pretty small overall piece of this.
It makes the project, where I would say, without sounding too short, it makes the total project work for Honeywell to give us the guarantee in savings. And I grilled them back and forth, as did Greg, of how does this work? How does this work? Because we were under the impression it didn't with the agreement up in South Deerfield, but also with the landfill. And I asked,
and does this have any, and also does this have any issues with our third-party contract for the leftover energy that we purchased from, because we signed a 3-year contract last fall, I believe, for our third-party supplier for all the city accounts. Do they have any terms as far as a minimum usage that they would bill for those? I don't know if that's in those type of third-party contract terms or not.
They definitely are. You have to be certain at a certain level within your historic disk usage, or the contract becomes in breach as well.
Okay.
It's usually a 20% threshold at maximum. Sometimes it's as little as 5 to 10%.
Okay. And this is all reviewed by the city solicitor, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Or
okay. The city attorney.
City attorney. Okay. Sorry if I got the term wrong.
Who is the third-party energy supplier at this point? I forget from that. Anyone know?
I never saw the contract that got renewed back in November. I know we reviewed the one 4 years ago, right, Maren? Or is that 5 years or 7 years ago? I can't remember these days.
Both, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the details, the name isn't that important.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, TransCanada was one that we did at one point. I don't remember if that's the one that we most recently went with, though.
No, I think that was the one that Mayor Totzink signed years and years ago, was TransCanada, because I think that's the one that we reviewed in must have been 14.
Okay.
And they renewed it on the 3-year term with Mayor Cadger.
And then did she go to Constellation or?
I think it was Constellation that we went
It's
to.
Constellation.
Constellation I renewed with. Okay.
That brings a bell. And so the contract with them would have been based on whatever energy is left over, right, after the solar fields are accounted for. Any
Correct, as of whatever it was in 2020.
Mm-hmm. Kind of along those lines, I guess this is another process question that I had, Mayor, which is I know that one of the things the city has is some goals around supporting, renewable energy goals for the city and just kind of generally, supporting resilience and forward thinking on energy. Are there any specifics where that this fits into that, or is it just more of kind of like a general part of that process?
No, it fits into some of the directives in the master plan about increasing our solar or non-fossil fuel energy profile, as well as a resolution and a piece of legislation that I signed as well as the city council to be carbon neutral by 2050.
Right.
Oh, so it's 2050? Because I remember, wasn't there you got together with some mayors and signed that wasn't statute,
that was 2030, yes, because I remember, Scott, you and I talking about, yes. And when there's a piece of legislation and 50, and I think that was your point, that 2030 was too soon. Like, how are you going to do that?
Correct.
And actually, you are at, like, I think your example was a fire engine, right? How will that happen? Yep. So we have an electric fire engine on our capital plan for 2023. They make them now.
They actually make them now?
Yeah.
Oh, they do.
Yeah, we're also looking to switch. I think in the next year, we just got a hybrid, another hybrid police car, and there's green communities. Actually, Cassie, is looking into and found, and we're looking at now Teslas for the police.
Is that a plug-in hybrid, or is that?
Chief Alberti wants one, of course.
Yeah, of course. I do too.
Yeah, I know, right?
I think the whole energy committee would like them.
Yeah. Maybe that's the first. You guys are the testers, right?
Nah, I'll take my Mustang Mach-E, but over a Tesla. But that's a separate discussion. Okay. As far as I don't know if it's good to go into detail questions a bit.
Yeah, I think
Jamie?
so. I think we're good. Yeah, I think we're good to move into some more specifics. I mean, in prep for tomorrow. Yeah.
On the municipal building air handling unit, did they look into, is this going to prevent at all? Is it still natural gas for heating, I'm assuming?
It is.
It's just replacing the air handling part of it? Okay.
Exactly.
Does it prevent anything from, if we were to switch over the natural gas heating part to an air source heat pump, that it would require additional capital beyond the air source heat pump replacement, but the new stuff that we're putting in, do we have to retrofit that for an air source heat pump later on?
The cost would be, the cost would be the same as far as like if we weren't going to do any of this project and we had to switch over. Although I think that cost would be more about the age of equipment than it would be the switchover. But no, this doesn't.
That doesn't prevent it from.
Absolutely.
Okay, from adding any additional cost if you were to switch over to air source heat pumps down the road. Okay. Did Honeywell look at considering doing air source heat pumps? Was that part of the 12 million that got shaved out, or was that even?
I don't even know if that made it into the 12 million. I think we cut it. It's just not within. I wasn't comfortable going for this project if it was over 7 million, unless it had a really strong ROI, and that long-term was great, but the recovery wasn't as fast as the other, because
I mean, with the cost of natural gas, that's going higher and escalating faster than the cost of electricity. Mm-hmm. So all that avoided natural gas could actually, it'd be interesting to see what the ROI was on that. Because, for example, of doing that versus doing solar, that actually may have two benefits. One, it has a pretty decent ROI, and I know there are a lot of mass save programs. I don't know how they would apply to city municipalities, but there's mass save programs for air source heat pumps, and you have all the natural gas avoided costs.
Mm-hmm.
And it would, one, reduce our carbon just like the solar would, but it also avoids any, if we were to have any contract issues with our solar facilities that could come up.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty, if you're doing it up there at one time, it's one of those things where you have one contractor do it at the same time, you get it all done. Maybe there's some savings of having that kind of stuff done at the same time. So that was some of the thought I had as far as air source heat pumps and stuff.
Okay, and I'll pass that on to the Honeywell team to be prepared to walk us through that tomorrow night.
Okay. On the LED lighting and control upgrades, one reason I bring this up is we had, I think it was a wastewater treatment plant 2 or 3 years ago, Marin, when they came with a proposal for replacing everything. It was a different company. I don't remember what the name of the company was at this point that did that project, but they came through and they proposed replacing every LED light in the entire wastewater treatment plant for, I don't know how many, it was at $90,000 or something like that. It was a very high amount. And when we dug into the contract, there were some that they were replacing an LED light for a closet that ran an estimated 5 hours a year. And the payback was like over 100 years. You'd have to replace the light before you'd ever paid back. So that was one of my concerns when I saw some of the LED lighting upgrades that were proposed. Is did they just go through and propose every light that if it's not LED to propose to replace it to LED? Because it may not make financial sense, for example, for closets to replace for LED or lights that have very low annual usage. Are they currently, the halogen lights? Are they CFLs? Are they, would we actually get that much energy savings from the existing, whatever it is? If it's incandescent going to LED, that's a huge payback. But if it's CFL going to LED or, the halogen type stuff going to LED, there's a lot less payback for that.
Yeah, just to add to that, what we found was in the review of that last one was that it made it look good at the overall picture. But when you dug into the details, there was so much, like, just to be blunt, sort of BS mixed in there that it wasn't, there's a lot of bad stuff mixed in with good stuff. And ultimately it still looked good, but when you dug into it, you realized there's so much stuff here that's not what we would want to do. It's not smart decisions at all. And so unless someone's really dug in and double checked Honeywell's review of this stuff, it is just, there's very likely that there's stuff in there that is not, wouldn't really look above water if it really was reviewed thoroughly.
For example, for the WWTP, we cut out, I think, probably about 50% of the upgrades they were proposing, and we vastly increased the ROI for the city and still got probably nearly most of the energy savings that they were proposing, because the stuff that we cut out was stuff that was very low utilization, and it was just, LEDs are still not cheap, and this was a couple years ago, so LEDs were a lot more expensive back then. And so we ended up still saving more money and got a quicker ROI, and we still had most of the energy savings that were being originally proposed. So it's one of those things where that company got paid by the light bulb type of thing. So they did as many light bulbs as they could to still make it look like it had a good ROI as an overall project. But when you broke it down, we could have a much better project if we trimmed out half of it for the city and just stuck with the stuff that had the really best payback and ROI. Yeah,
so I feel 90% sure we cut out everything at the wastewater treatment plant except for the solar array that we count separately because the return on investment just wasn't there. And we also got rid of the car canopy at 50 Payson parking lot because of just costs of building such a structure right now, really cut the ROI down significantly. So we went to adding a little more solar on the wastewater array just to get more bang for our buck. But the wastewater treatment plant, most if not all that's directly with the plant, we cut out because it's so, the return on investment's not there, and it's in such bad shape to improve any part of it right now without like a very holistic approach seemed like a waste of money.
They were probably proposing to replace those lights that we cut out of the previous project.
Maybe.
My guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, say Stephen, the lighting control upgrades, were they just for wastewater treatment in this proposal, or is it for beyond? Because I know they're obviously looking at multiple.
It was in multiple buildings. I think even there was control upgrades for the high school. And that was another question, because we had UMass 2 or 3 years ago, I believe, came and evaluated all our buildings, and the high school was one of those buildings. And when they reviewed it, it actually showed that there wasn't really any thing that they said everything was going basically as it could have been, because I mean the school's only now 8 years old.
Yep.
And they didn't have any recommendations. They actually had somebody come in and review the control systems with Larry, and we didn't find any things that could be improved. So that's why I was curious when I saw that as far as the high school, just because of how new it is, and we had basically a non-interested party, a third party that has no financial interest in it, didn't see any upgrades needed for the high school control systems.
We cut a lot out of the schools. Well, a lot of out of the high school, and I would defer to the questions on that to Honeywell around why.
There's still $500,000 for upgrades, I believe, right? Yeah.
I don't know. Well, I'm looking at it. That's about 184,000 for LED lighting and control upgrades.
Okay.
It's the 5 buildings. So it's a relatively small part, although it's the 5th biggest line item, 6th biggest. I don't know, but it's just significant, and it's across 4 of the 5 buildings.
And there may be a political issue with that before the council as well. So, I mean, I think that that's something great to flesh out and ask Honeywell tomorrow about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll make a note to make sure that they're prepared to answer it.
Okay. And actually, after this, I can send you an email with some of the questions that I'm going through here, and then you could email it on to John at Honeywell.
Yeah, and you can, and certainly you can email John as well, or copy. I mean, I'm not looking, I'm fine with that. Your, terminology, there's no reason to paste and cut what you're thinking and getting the language.
Okay. I'll take care of that tonight then.
Great, thank you.
Okay. The solar, kind of dig into the solar a bit. So do you know any idea how big the systems are, KW wise?
I don't. I didn't pull it all up. I just got back from vacation, which isn't your problem, but it was.
That's fine. I just did this morning too, so or this afternoon.
Good for you.
So that the next question would be, what is the proposed production per year, which ties into how much as far as we were worrying about. Did they propose battery systems at any point? Because I know one of our big charges, we have commercial accounts with Eversource, is you get charged demand charges.
Right.
And so really deferring the energy charge is one part of the bill, but the demand is also a huge part of the bill. And I don't know if they ever looked at the part of, trying to smooth out those demand spikes to reduce the demand charge, which could have a significant cost reduction. But I don't know what the payback is and what kind of analysis they've done on that. So that can also,
it was
I guess since we're municipal, we don't fall into the 30%. So
yeah, they talked a little bit to Larry about it, but they talked a lot to Greg about it, especially with all the pumps that we have and how infrequently they run and the cost. That's a huge utility cost for us, but I don't remember. It's not about remembering. I don't know what the outcome of that was.
Okay. Because also with EV chargers, there's also that if you could have a decent spike if everybody plugs in their EV. I'll get to the charging stations later, but that, depending on what that cycle is of when the cars come in, if everybody plugs in after they've worked all day at 5 o'clock and we have, a fleet, the city's fleet worth of EVs start charging at 5 p.m., that could cause a new demand spike that we didn't have before, especially if we switch to air source heat pumps down the road with our usage. So demand charges can be very important down the road. So, when the city was doing their annual, when they were reviewing the electric consumption, did they account for the retirement of the 4 elementary buildings and the projection of the new Mountain View School?
Yes.
In the change in usage? Okay. And that included the new solar system on the new school?
Yes.
In their calculation? Okay, because we have, Maren, was it 130 kW going in there, or is that bigger?
120, 130, yeah.
Okay, because, the high school is 130. Okay, so Mountain View is about the same as what the high school is. All right.
Yeah.
One thing is, who's going to be monitoring and servicing these solar PV systems? And the reason I bring that up is the high school is a prime example. We went 2 summers where we had broken inverters down, and we lost out on probably nearly $100,000 worth of SRECs and save energy production.
I do remember
because
that.
we didn't notice that the inverters were down. Is that going to be the responsibility of the city, or is that going to be completely Honeywell? How is that going to work?
It's split between Honeywell and the city. And the idea is that we're in the process of looking at DPW and what that position would look like to monitor it. There's not really a specific position in DPW that would do that. So the idea would be.
One thing that's been, I've noticed as an issue in the past is just we don't even, as far as collecting all our bills and monitoring our usage, we've tried to herd cats sometimes to get all that so we can kind of monitor the issue with the existing solar systems. But I don't even think we've gotten to a spot where we actually know what our city consumption is on a monthly basis without a lot of work with going back to look at that and to even keep track of how close are we to getting to that contract breach. I know Scott's done a lot. Marin was met, I think, sometimes with Zoe and others, but it seems like we've never really gotten past the goal line on that as far as collecting all the energy usage. And it seems we're just adding on to that now with multiple more solar accounts.
And actually that my correspondence with Zoe about collecting those account numbers got stopped because of the Honeywell project, and that it was somehow going to be incorporated into the Honeywell project. So that was when I was told, like, okay, well, we're not going to give you guys these account numbers to set it, because I had figured out about how you could subscribe to an Eversource portal and add accounts to it and have sort of a portal view of usage on a bunch of accounts. And it was like you could do up to 30 accounts on specific meters per viewing account. So we might have to set up a couple accounts to cover all the meters, and then all that kind of got hit pause.
Yep.
Because of the Honeywell project.
So we got our electric accounts down to 17. Yeah. And we also did a review of all the solar contracts that, for the finance committee, it might be not the detail they're looking for, but I can get that. And Borrego was a pain we had to get the lawyer involved, but I can get you that summary.
Okay.
Borrego's the Deerfield.
No, Borrego's the Oliver Street.
Oliver Street.
I don't even know the company. Deerfield changed about 4 times.
Yeah.
I don't even know who they are now. Was it L4 or something like that? I can't remember the name of it, what it is now. Because it's still the Wild West when it comes to solar developers. There are companies buying companies buying companies.
Why was the primary? You guys are primarily looking at solar at the wastewater treatment facility.
Yep.
And there's definitely some open area there, but there's a lot of trees around that. I'm curious why it wasn't looked at like the other landfill and some other spaces that would be much more optimal for solar production.
We should look at the production of what's at wastewater, but it's a healthy piece of solar production, and we have complete control over the land.
I just think the ultimate paybacks on a brownfield that you'd get at a landfill and the amount of open space you have there too, it would be something to compare, the pricing pieces as well as the production pieces in comparison those two places. I know that right now, one of the things that we're doing in the solar ordinance zoning group is working on getting that removed, because when it was originally done, there was sort of basically politics played, and it was written into the ordinance that it would never allow development there. But if we have a year or two before the access is actually going to be built, or even just less than that, but that'll hopefully get cleaned up and be removed so that that facility could be used.
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to that, but we have control over wastewater, and the ROI, Greg feels that it's worth it. And we can do it in the next 10 months. And going through the landfill process, and remember how contentious that was, as well as what's going on with open space and things in ordinance and zoning. It was more of an idea to expand the solar profile. And there was a benefit to do that sooner rather than later, with the idea that more would be added with what came out of ordinance review, state and federal programs, you know, some limitations that we have now.
Because the one thing I think the argument over the Oliver landfill has probably changed a lot in the last 8 years. Because I mean that was 2013, I believe, when that went in service. So I think community perception and pushback is probably going to be a lot different involvement than it was back in 2013. Because I think that was the first landfill solar in the entire state of Mass, I believe, when it was constructed. So that was just new for everybody. And I think you always get some amount of pushback when something's brand new, whereas now solar is so commonplace. When people drive down the highway, they see panels everywhere. As far as in fields, I think it might be a lot different reception-wise as far as standing in a, because it's already a landfill. You're never going to have trees on it. You're never going to reduce the open space. And it's never going to be developed on. On the municipal building, do you know about our current roof? Structural engineers reviewed it, and it's strong enough for the panels.
Yes.
What is the age of the existing roof? Does it need to be replaced within the next 25 years? That's one concern. If you put up panels, you're going to have to spend money to pull the panels off to replace the roof if it doesn't have 25 years of life left in it. Mm-hmm. So that could be an additional cost as far as not doing the roof now, for example, before putting the panels up. That could incur the city a lot more extra money that wasn't, I don't believe, accounted for in the proposal that I saw as far as avoided costs, because that could be an additional cost. Because if the roof only has 10 more years, and we're talking about doing deferred maintenance and stuff, that's a 10-year life left on that roof. Or if it's already past due, putting up panels could cost us a lot of money to then just take them all right back off, replace the roof membrane, and then put it back on. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing is, if our goal is to reduce carbon with the city as far as our consumption with the city accounts, one thing we're going to talk about later, community aggregation. Right now we're bound with the third-party contract, but once that renews, we could talk about how we switch, we'll talk about community aggregation later, but the one option of that community aggregation is we join all the city accounts in with that aggregation. And there are options for 100% renewable third-party contracts. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if our third-party supplier right now, did we sign with 100% renewable on the third-party supplier, or do they have fossil fuels in their portfolio?
I believe they have fossil fuels. Okay. The percent went down.
Yeah. But so that's a thing where that's a zero cost option really, except for the higher electricity rates that you would pay for the 100% renewable option on aggregation. Mm-hmm. But of course there's no capital cost in that. So you factor that into the cost reduction. That's all I had about the solar EV charging stations.
Can I ask with the solar?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Does Honeywell have like a contractor or somebody picked out to do the solar, or that's something that they would do and just like
they would do, right? It's all their subs.
Okay. Sorry, Stephen, go ahead.
Yep. On the EV charging stations, I didn't see any mention in the presentation about how many were being added, and do you know what the proposals are for that and locations?
I cut them out.
Okay, the presentation still says solar and EV charging stations.
Yeah, because the solar canopy at 50 Payson, I took out, and I said no EV charging stations. We took those out too. I just feel like there are other.
It's in the presentation.
Yeah.
Okay. because my questions were going to be like, I figured it might have been part of the solar canopy at 32 Payson at the public safety complex, which if we were going to buy EVs or stuff like that, that's one thing. But I didn't know. I know we don't have any electric police cars at this point, and
Right.
that's something that always could be done at a later point with different grants. So
That's exactly where
my
I
questions
was.
to that.
Mhm.
Especially since we just put 2 in or 4 stations at 50 Payson right next door. So if it was public accessible, then they could just go next door as opposed to 32 Payson, which seems odd that you have the public parking in behind the police station. I don't know how Chief Alberti would like that too much.
Yeah, the parking behind 32 Payson is not public parking. So
Yeah, that's yeah.
yeah, I know that there have been some talks or questions about putting like 2 of the EV chargers up in that section, like people on the bike path or whatnot, which would be great. But I'm anticipating or hoping for grants that will specifically look at that. And even with the Teslas, there is some opportunity when we talk to other police departments who have done this, that Tesla will put in the superchargers at a dramatically reduced cost. I mean, I don't know that as fact yet, but just to hold off on those.
Yeah, because if there was chargers back there for fleet vehicles, that's one thing.
Right.
But then they could also, for right now, use the 50 Payson because in the evenings or during the day or on the weekends, off times. Okay. So that was my question on the chargers. In the investment grade audit, they said that it was released in July, but then it had a cost of $200 and something thousand. Is that something that they've already spent that cost and it's just getting rolled into the main contract? I just found that interesting because they said the report was issued in July, but there's a line item for that investment grade audit. Is that another audit on top of the one that says was issued in July?
It's a further detailed audit than the one in July, because there were things, one, that we had no interest in doing, but also there were questions like on the roof and wastewater, where things could go or not. And it's rolled into the cost.
Okay, so that's an additional audit that's going to be done based on the previous 3 that are mentioned on that slide 15 for the 222. Okay. As far as, this might get into the energy efficiency part of things, going into like the contribution cost detail. On the solar capital budget, they basically said that, part of the reason to make it cash flow positive was we were avoiding $50,000 a year in solar costs. Were those any part of our capital budget to begin with, as far as doing $50,000 for solar per year to build solar down the road?
Not in the 20 to 25 capital project, but in the next variation of that, DPW is adding it.
Okay.
And that had to do with master plan and hopeful incentives. Yeah.
Because one thing I noticed is they use the current cost, the 3.3 million, and they spread that over 20 years, and they assume that is the cost for what solar would be, the avoided cost for in the future. But one thing, just even from personal experience, I installed the solar system in 2012 and another one just this year. The capital cost for solar panels and inverters has come down drastically in 8 years. And there's still a downward trajectory for this equipment going forward. So using the assumption that it would cost 3.3 million to do the same solar project in, say, 10 years may not be true. So I'm curious what discounts they applied to their assumptions, because it doesn't look like they applied any discounts to the cost of the panels and things when it came to the avoided cost calculations. So if they could provide details on that, that'd be great.
Okay.
And on the solar incentives, do you know which block of the SMART program they are assuming? Because those fill up as time, and as the blocks fill up, the price decreases. So I didn't know if they assumed which block they're in. Was it the one at the time they did the audit, or when they expect to actually get the interconnection approval from Eversource to energize, and get the SMART application approved, because then that'll determine a lot of the payback cost for the solar. Is that correct, Maren?
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest, at this point, smart is next to useless in terms of actual value. The difference is, and this is where the detail about whether or not they're actually considering batteries is that unless you're into the tiers that have battery systems involved, smart is very negligible. And especially like Stephen's saying, if they're just estimating right now, they're going to be way off in terms of what the actual value is of those programs. So it's important to sort of clarify and dig into those numbers as well, unless we're going to get a really big surprise later down the line.
And you get additional credits if you were to connect to the landfill, for example, because it's a brownfield location, right? That gets higher SREC credits than if. Now, the first solar system on the landfill, that was 100% because that was SREC 1, I believe. But now in the SMART program, did they change the SRECs? Is it tiered, or is that just SREC 2? Is it still that way in SMART?
No, it's not SRECs at all. It's completely separate outside of that
okay.
system.
It's just payment. Okay. Are there any benefits for brownfield SMART sites in SMART?
Very much so. It's not paid back through that financing is through the working with utility on what they're paying you per kilowatt hour of production. So it's different than a REC-based sort of incentive. It's a electricity payment difference, and that's why the same thing. If you're using battery systems, your electricity generation cost is higher than if you're just straight, panel in middle of any field or something like that. So there's definitely some different incentives there and different values. And again, the concern is. There's a lot of different ways to make these numbers look better or worse, depending on the truth of the numbers that they're using behind them. So just having that sort of depth of review is important. So like making sure like which tranche of SMART are they saying that's going to get paid through? Clarifying where we're projected when would be entering it and listed in it, or where that is today.
I mean, that was just one of my big things when I saw the contribution cost detailed program. A lot of to make it pencil out to be beneficial to the city was based on the avoided costs for the next 20 years. So that was a very key point in making this cash flow positive for the next 20 years. So that's why those assumptions behind those I found were to be very important to dig into. Mm-hmm. And then as far as on the air quality, going to the high school, is that changing the amount of filtration per hour above the DESI? Because I know back in the discussions of opening up the schools, they all met the DESI guidelines. Do you have any numbers of how much it would improve it beyond? Because I'm assuming this will increase the cycles per hour on the buildings, or like even for the municipal 50 Payson, is there any details on how much that would increase the air quality? Like just details of that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Because if they can kind of just summarize what is the actual material result in increase in air quality, that would be, instead of just saying it cleans the air. Because I mean, mm-hmm. Okay. When they talk about performance guarantees, when I listened to the finance committee, I was kind of confused in how they described it. They talked about all the money they've paid out, but they didn't really, I didn't know what was the triggers for that, how that works. Is it based on, so for the solar systems, we'll figure on that to start, because that's the easiest one. It's kind of measurable. If they say, okay, we are going to make X number of kilowatt hours, and if we don't, then what happens? They just write us a check? How does that performance guarantee work?
Yes, they write us a check for the difference.
Okay, and I'm assuming we have the numbers. Can they give us the numbers on what their guarantee is, or is that part of the contract negotiation?
We're negotiating.
Okay. Because just having the expected production, there's two different numbers. There's the expected production and what they would guarantee. Yep. And I completely understand that what they would guarantee is going to be less than what the expected production would be. Mm-hmm. And that can be, but I mean, just getting the production numbers would be a helpful yardstick. see. So you talked about how you're going to consult maybe the school committee with some of the stuff at the high school. Are we going to be reducing our O&M budgets going forward now that we have this project for the city? I mean, is it helping avoid those costs? So now that we're spending this money, are we now going to offset it with reductions in the capital plan equal to this to make it still, or is it still going to, or is it just going to add on?
Yeah, I mean, if there's something on the capital plan that's taken care of by this project, then it'll come off the capital plan as completed, but it's two different pots of money. To pay for this project, we're shifting money in the budget, and there have been other savings. Like one is we're going out of, we're making or have made intermunicipal agreements for certain services like weights and measures. We're doing that right now for building inspection, which is significantly lower. We've made some changes with just how we pay for the health insurance. We were negative 2%, and then we were 0%, and how the trust is using surplus. It has, I don't know, I think they should have 3 months of surplus, and they have 8 or 9. So there were some savings there.
Okay. As far as does DOER require a independent technical professional at all review Honeywell's assumptions and contract at all as part of the DOER?
Yes.
Or is that left up to the city? Okay. Does that independent consultant issue a report or anything like that that's available, or?
Yeah, I would assume it's a public document.
Process?
Yeah, we haven't gotten to that part because we're still going back and forth about the details in the contract and what work is actually going to be done.
So that occurs after we sign on the dotted line?
No, that happens when we feel we've negotiated what would be a contract we're both comfortable in executing. It goes unsigned to DOER for tech review.
Okay. Has anything been looked at as far as when the solar system in the wastewater treatment facility, as far as the ground? Have they tested the ground to make sure that there's no unforeseen issues underneath there that could incur additional costs, or is that just going to be assumed as part of the contingency?
We've looked at the land, and it's been determined to be structurally sound for it, but I don't want to put the spotlight on Cassie. I know there's some environmental stuff and testing, and I'm not sure where that is, but maybe Cassie can speak to that.
Yeah, so we did do a preliminary site visit. And again, this is just looking for how the Wetlands Protection Act may come into play here in terms of proximity to wetland areas jurisdictional to the Conservation Commission. And what I'm waiting on now is like an updated wetlands delineation for the area. That'll probably, I'm assuming that has implications for stability of the land in terms of where wetlands explicitly are. For my review, for the Conservation Commission's review, there's additional things like buffer zones and such that probably may not have impacts on stability or what that has to do with it. Though I know that the commission, their review is not based on the stability of the land. It's more just on the impacts to the Wetlands Protection Act. Though there are engineers on the commission who do end up sometimes asking questions akin to that. But I can, those reports will be public, so I can share that with the Energy Committee if you'd like.
Okay, because I know in the past when they were looking at the solar land or the landfill solar, the wastewater treatment plant was also reviewed, and there was some issue with sludge in the fields there that could have been a concern with siting of a solar system there.
Yeah, I have.
Because that could cost, if you have to build on top of it, as far as being able to dig down to put in foundations, there could be, like, because at the landfill solar, you have to put everything on top of the landfill because of the caps and stuff. So I don't know. Mariana, do you remember anything about that? Any details? I keep going to you.
For that site, no, I'm not sure. I don't remember anything at that site that was a concern. I mean, back to Cassie, though, there's also going to be flood zone review too, I assume, right?
Yep, that's all part of it. and even actually a priority rare habitat, but I think they're outside of that.
Mhm.
So, but I do, speaking just to what I know or have on record for the history of, they did do a feasibility study for that area. They were trying to put in, I want to say it was like anaerobic digestion. So obviously a different thing, but it was still within the same area, and it was reviewed. It's over 3 years old, so it's not valid for the Conservation Commission's review purposes, but I did share that old document with them. So
wait, Cassie, so location wise, you're saying, so it's just south of where the buildings are then? It's sort of up higher on that area?
yeah, it's up higher. There's like this big open field essentially, I want to say to the east of the building, if it was oriented. My understanding is, yeah, it's kind of to the northeast of where the wastewater treatment plant buildings are.
Okay.
And yeah, that big open field area has like a big willow in the center of it.
Yeah, yeah, that's what gets back to them. Really be curious to see what kind of system size they're actually offering to fit into that space. But
I think something else, keep in mind with environmentally sensitive areas, we've seen a couple other solar systems in this area. One, I think, in Williamsburg, and another one in like Southampton area that have run afoul of some environmental regulations after the fact, where companies have been fined and like some shoddy work has been done, and there's been runoff and other issues. So obviously, in a sensitive area like that, close to a wastewater treatment facility, we want to make sure that. And obviously the regulations are in place to make sure of that anyway, but even projects that have cleared those hurdles have then sometimes had problems after the fact. So something to be cognizant of. I've seen a few stories of fines and things like that recently. So
no, I appreciate you mentioning that. I mean, Williamsburg had that huge one. So I think it's very much on the forefront of the commission's consideration, and making sure that those things are done in a way that meets the regulations and potentially, and then some if necessary. But we have the commission's really good about ensuring during construction monitoring is a key part of it that I don't know that every community does,
right,
which is big for preventing those kind of, you got a big rainstorm happens and suddenly there's this big problem. So
totally.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point to bring up.
Hey, I'm sorry to say, guys, but I've got to jump to another meeting actually. I've got the school committee's negotiations with the union tonight, so I have to jump to that. But have a good rest of your meeting. You'll still be in quorum, so you guys can continue without me. Sorry, I didn't realize this was going to go longer than an hour. So
it's okay. Thank you, Marion.
Good night, everybody. Thank you, Mayor, for your information.
Thank you, Mary. Good luck.
Thanks.
Negotiations.
Stephen, I know you maybe had to go too, or no, or do you?
Yeah, I had to go half an hour early, but yeah. So I think I've been through my questions as far as you went, I think, on this project. And I'll send out some of the detailed stuff and then to John tonight, and I'll copy you, Mary.
Okay.
For the finance committee for tomorrow.
All right. Well, let me ask you just to hang on for another 5-10 minutes if you can, just so we can keep quorum here for the rest of the meeting.
Yeah, I'm going to switch to my phone. I'm going to turn off my video and get my car, but I'll be able to stay on via phone.
Okay. Cool. So I do appreciate your thoroughness and going through all this and asking a lot of questions, taking some of the stuff that had been discussed, but I know you went through this very carefully, so appreciate that.
Yep. Thank you very much, Mayor, for your responses and questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you for that. And while we have you here,
Yeah.
I put this in a quick email, but I wanted to bring up, the municipal aggregation. Stephen mentioned that as well, so we'll move on to that. And just, Stephen said he can attend the finance committee meeting tomorrow to continue the discussion on the Honeywell contract. So if we have anything else, we'll send it through him to discuss. And if Scott, if you want to jump in on that tomorrow too, that'd be great. If you're available. I am not, unfortunately. But yeah, so for municipal aggregation, you're probably familiar with it just as a concept, if nothing else. We've only just started discussing it. I've went through and brought it to the committee a couple months ago and had a conversation with a woman whose name I'm forgetting now, from Greenfield, who led their charge through the aggregation process, and been talking with a consultant from Good Energy who's helped a number of municipalities throughout the Commonwealth through this process. So just to get the lay of the land, sort of what the process looks like, figure out, if it's something as a committee we wanted to discuss and recommend potentially. So, it's obviously it's a multi-step process. It's lengthy. It's probably years at this point in terms of start to finish, given some of the process and some of the holdups with was it DPU, I think, perhaps, who has sign off and has to eventually get us through the regulatory process. But it's definitely something that we're interested in. We thought, from a city standpoint, in terms of promoting renewable energy for not only city consumption, but every individual citizen and business to do that. And it's a great way to sort of to aggregate and to get some bulk buying power and to have some say in terms of the energy mix that we're promoting as a city, that we're buying into. So the general process, is that it would take a city council resolution to put us on the path to do municipal aggregation. But of course, we wanted to talk to you about it and get your thoughts and any, if something you've thought about previously or had any discussions about, or if it's anything that, kind of just at square one here at the moment.
Yeah. So it's interesting that this comes up now. I mean, certainly it's something that I'm interested in, and I think City Council has an appetite for as well. I almost have it done, the municipal light plan bylaws for broadband. About to put the feasibility study out there and pay for that. And there was a curious conversation that we had with South Hadley, and then Tom Peake and I had around, can you write an MLP in a broad way to maybe be able to oversee, encourage, or facilitate municipal electric aggregation? So the answer so far has not been a hard no, but I would, I want to say that was considered, or it's mentioned less than 2 hours. So, kind of like first steps there. The nice thing about doing an intergovernmental agreement with South Hadley around broadband and then the MLP is that you don't have to go through the procurement law of 30B. But the procedural steps that you mentioned quickly in your email, that all with, City Council and the me and DPU and whatnot. But there are some benefits and cost savings if we could do aggregation through our existing MLP that we have that IGA agreement. So I say that like that's jello. We just kind of considered that as a possibility. And actually Mike Sullivan, who used to be the town administrator over in South Hadley, was the one who suggested it and said, hey, have you looked at this? It might be when you're, negotiating an IGA or, and even looking at your MLP, it's not going to hurt you to make it a little more broader than broadband if it's possible. And I don't know if it's possible.
Okay. But the thought would be to team up with South Hadley, basically to offer that as sort of a combination package and to increase the overall number of customers and buying power and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So broadband, it would, this idea around aggregation, I don't even know if you can do it through an MLP. There was a suggestion you could, but our negotiations with South Hadley are nothing to do with aggregation. I mean, it's on the wish list and how we could make that happen. I think it's definitely something to explore if it helps us, not have to go through an RFP or RFQ process. It might be worth it. And we would already have an administrative body to handle it. Those are the very, very, very initial thoughts around it. But there's certainly strong interest.
Okay.
Around that.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about from that standpoint. Like going in, I think my guess would be that South Hadley would have to have their own approval for something. We'd have to sort of do it on a similar timeline, and then whether it could be done through the MLP versus having separate RFPs for each town or whatever. But that's interesting. That's something we can certainly discuss as we go
right.
with this, and sort of keep the process moving or get the process moving. The great thing from the standpoint of what the consultant said is that there's no cost to us up front. They kind of assume all the costs and take it out later through the sales process or when they're eventually doing the energy providing. So that's the nice thing, is that we don't have to worry about any sort of upfront cost to do this. But we can also shop around for multiple consultants that we might want to talk to about that. They just happened to reach out at the same time I was talking to Greenfield, so it just was a good happenstance kind of thing. And I know I've mentioned to Councilor Zarrett briefly, we've had a conversation or two about it. He seems generally supportive. I think Councilor Peak probably as well. And it's the type of thing that we could start. I guess one of the questions we had is whether it was something that we'd want to try to get a resolution for now, during this current term, or obviously with elections and some turnover happening in the council, whether it makes sense to wait till after that or not. But if you have thoughts on that.
I think that there's an appetite for it now. So, what would be the harm to wait on the resolution? And if it's a step we have to do no matter what, then let's get one step out of the way. The question I would have is the date of the passing of the resolution. Is that resolution good for only a certain number of years after? Like I remember with the MLP, we very specifically had to have votes in 2 different fiscal years, and we had to take certain actions, like get it to the state or whatnot, or we'd have to start all over again. And I think that was also connected to the non-binding vote. So I don't know how. This process is complicated. The only thing I would say to wait is because there's some kind of a time issue.
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, there's no statute of limitations on how long that resolution is good for. And really the delay seems to be, getting the resolution, getting the process going, and then it's kind of in the black hole of like DPU. And there's, some municipalities have been waiting for 18 months or more for their approval to come back. And that's kind of where the wait and see process is. But I think if you've gotten to that point, then you should, the resolution shouldn't be the issue at that point.
Right.
But it's a good thing to check on for sure, and just make sure we understand what we're.
Yeah, I don't see, other than why would we wait? I think that not that the next city council wouldn't have support. I think it would, but I think there's a huge appetite to take a good hard look and start the process.
Okay. And I know Daria, who's the one from the consultant, has come to a meeting with us already and was interested in, having a chance to talk to you. I don't know if you're, at the next meeting, I think she'd be able to come back and do a quick, I don't know how much of a pitch she has to do to sell us on it, but versus just like, a quick Q&A and like talk through the process a little bit. So I'm happy to invite her back for September. If you're able to, I think I preliminary had you on the calendar to join us again then. So
when's the meeting in September?
It's I think we decided it's going to be September 20th. We were debating between the 13th and the 20th, but September 20th at 6.
Yep, it's already on my calendar.
Yeah, I know, right? Zoe had penciled in.
Zoe had it. Okay.
And I just we hadn't confirmed which one it's going to be, so
okay,
we'll figure the 13th for you.
Oh, okay.
Do the 20th.
Sounds good.
Excellent. All right, it's good. So we'll ask her back for that to talk a little bit more in depth about that and any questions that we have, and that'll be great. While you're here, I know one of the other things on our list today was green communities or grant options, and I know something Maren and Cassie were going to talk a little bit about. Perhaps been working on. Maren's not here, but Cassie, do you want to talk and give us an update on anything there?
Yeah, the main update was kind of just narrowing it down even further about what we wanted to try to pursue. And it seems like potentially to me, the best runner right now would be to try to do this, the streetlight LED conversion. Because I know that it's not all of our lights are converted yet. I think, what did they say? About 2/3 have been completed. So that was the one I was thinking seems like the most feasible for the amount of time period that we have to kind of go for this grant. It's interesting learning more about this Honeywell project. It does seem that a lot of these things overlap, the things that they're going to try to ultimately put into place. So I wonder too, I mean, this is for the future when they do actually put it all into place, but I wonder if green communities could be some of that potential grant funding to help pay for this, for some,
Yep.
yeah, some pieces of it, obviously not the entirety of it, but I think it could be that could be a great opportunity. And then potentially also exploring, and maybe Mayor, since you're here, I don't know if you can speak to this at all, but one element of it is covering part of the cost. I think the most it can be is $7,000 towards an EV vehicle acquisition, that's and an electric vehicle acquisition for new ones. And I don't know, I mean, talking to Jeff Bagg about this, there was a question of like, you know, that's a pretty big cost, you know, minus at most 7,000, but still it's a big cost, and it depended on if that was in the works already for the city's plans to get a vehicle. So
Yeah,
if it is, it could support that, but if it isn't.
So I signed off on the police getting a hybrid. It's a part of the capital plan, and it's a part of our plan to, you know, rotate. We do the same thing with ambulances.
Yeah.
That said, I would like to pursue, and the chief would like to pursue, actually the purchase, if possible, under green communities, of 2 Teslas, if we get that same amount for each of them.
Cool.
The hybrid truck is $65,000. So my understanding from talking to Westport, Connecticut, although I'm a little wary because it's Connecticut and, you know, Massachusetts has their own laws, vice versa, that with rebates and whatnot, they were able to get one with all the paint at for 51.
Wow. Okay.
But the big thing, they were also able to negotiate with Tesla for 2 superchargers.
Oh.
Yeah, and so I don't know if we'd be able to do it. They did it a while ago. You know, the gas savings just on the hybrid, it's amazing. Like, it's just, so, you know, what's the savings on the Tesla, and also maintenance? We spend a ton of money on maintenance of gasoline cars. Yeah, so the total, the cost, I know Chief took on that part of it, if it was, you know, worth it. What did those numbers cross? But if there's, I would not pursue, or even, I would not pursue that if we couldn't get green community money for it.
Okay. All right, cool. Well,
yeah.
Then I'll look into that and see, you know, there's all kinds of good information out there about what's needed. All I know is definitely the max. I know one of the max is 5,000, one of the max is 7,000. So I need to like figure out which one's which. I have done that in the past. I don't have it right now, but yeah, I think that could be the most that it could help towards is 7,000 or 5,000. Yeah.
No, that helps.
This is Steven.
Yeah, Steven.
Sorry. Just one thing on the, is there any replacement trucks coming up down the road? Because Ford, of course, is coming out with the F-150 Lightning next year, and they are having versions for work vehicles. I don't know if they're also having a version for police interceptor type Ford F-150 Lightning, but that would be a complete EV pickup truck. And I don't know if we have that in our fleet for our police vehicles or not, but that could be an option too.
We don't, but we do have in the capital plan, actually plans to buy 2 of those exact trucks for DPW.
Okay, so yeah, because I think even the work version of the Lightning, I think was only 39 or something as a starting cost.
Greg was very excited about it.
Okay.
And I don't know if there's green community. Yeah, so we wouldn't. The truck that the police have now was a different grant from the DEA. So they're not.
It's free DEA drug money. Okay.
Yeah, it was the drug money. And there's a possibility we can use some drug money for the Teslas, but as I said, like that grant would kick it off. I'm not really, you know, I wouldn't want to look at the Teslas, as cool as it would be, without some green community money. And then the DPW is actually overdue for 1 truck, and then we had an additional truck in their capital plan.
It might be worth looking into other OEMs too, besides Tesla, because I mean, Ford, for example, I'm driving their new Mustang EV.
Yeah.
They're coming out of the GT, so I'm assuming they're going to have a police version of it. So that could be an option too.
Yes.
'Cause I know Chevy, the Chevy Bolt and stuff, there's not really police version cars, I would think.
Yep.
But the Mach-E definitely, probably, I'm sure they're going to have some police versions of it.
Yeah, Captain Kelly had been talking about that actually, about Ford and there's some kind of approval for like police cars. Like we had to wait an extra year to get the hybrids because it didn't have some like certification by I don't know what, but
Because I know Ford specializes in police vehicles, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're one of the main police suppliers. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming Ford probably thought of that for the Mach-E when they were designing it over the west. So maybe they already have that approval.
well, and depending, yeah, I mean, and also depending on the green community, grant and the timing, maybe Ford will have that out. I mean, I'm not stuck on Teslas, I'm more stuck on electric cars.
Yeah. No, I was just saying that might be an option. I don't know if they have cheaper ones, or since it's a brand new one, they may have better deals than Tesla, just because Tesla wanted to get their name out on a police vehicle, where Ford may be wanting to do the same thing for the Mach-E.
Yep.
Cassie, what is the deadline for the Green Communities grant, the current round?
They're due in October. I can pull up the exact date right now. I want to say it's the 18th. Hold on just a second.
Okay. Yeah, I knew it was coming up. I knew it was like 2 months away. So
Yeah. So and if it's too quick of a turnaround, we can still. I mean, there's the next period will come up again. So 'cause
right.
I do block grants, 2 blocks in a year. So.
Okay. And I assume, the EV, incentives are not going to be going anywhere because they're going to want to keep pushing that for a while. So.
Well, and if we get a sense that the Ford, like that's actually, if that's going to happen, then maybe the second block makes, I mean, we hit the capital plan by getting the hybrid. So that's fine. And if the Ford comes out with the police cruiser and it's cheaper than the Tesla, there's more incentives, depending on what applying for the second grant. I mean, the second block of that grant just might make more sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In which case, maybe we could focus on the street light thing for now, like the short term, just kind of get that in place. So,
yeah, my plan is I'll kind of pursue both in tandem and see which one ends up fleshing out more than the other. Streetlights and the electric vehicles, and then we can go forward if we can. But
Okay.
Super. And yeah, I know it's a while before our next meeting, so if there's something, feel free to send stuff for further discussion if needed. But I think those are good plans generally that we would certainly support.
Awesome.
Cass, anything else on that?
That was it for me. Yeah, that was my main update, is kind of hammering out those 2 to pursue more.
Okay. Excellent. Appreciate that. Sorry, I lost my agenda here for a second. I think we've touched a little bit on the solar ordinance working group. Maren mentioned that. We could probably have a further update on that next time. That process is still ongoing. Removing the restriction on the other landfill is one thing that's trying to happen there with solar. It would be a larger scale piece. The rest of it's just kind of, generally figuring out what zoning things currently apply to solar, updating definitions, and just kind of making sure that we're not making it harder for solar projects and encouraging them where we can. So that's still ongoing. We can talk about that a little bit more.
Does the solar ordinance, as it stands now, does it take into consideration the Dover Amendment?
That's a good question. I don't recall that having come up. I can mention that to Curtis, who's been very on top of all this stuff. So I have to plead ignorance. I don't even know what the Dover Amendment is. So
it basically allows solar companies to have free will of where they're putting solar.
Oh.
And we've had some interesting conversations, not with this, but with neighborhoods and on Florence Road most recently, where there was some argument around wetlands and that, and it should just wholly prohibit that solar array from going in. And because of the Dover Amendment, it's going in.
Okay. The Dover Amendment is that a state level or?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. And so whatever we could do wouldn't necessarily be able to override that perhaps.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know how close you guys are with that, the language of that ordinance, but I'm certainly happy at whatever point to send it to the city attorney,
Okay.
who helps us negotiate all things solar. He's really up on it.
Yep.
So I'll leave it to the group of when it makes sense to do that. But if that's a consider, or when it's done, but something like a solar ordinance, and I'm sure Owen has mentioned or intends to do the same thing. We don't necessarily get legal review on every ordinance, but this is certainly one we would want a legal review.
Right. Yeah, and I think what we're working on right now is just kind of updating the zoning language and starting to figure out what projects zoning applies to even versus, I think the original idea that Owen had, which was like to have an ordinance which requires or at least like very much promotes solar in certain circumstances. Like that's not something that we've kind of moved away from that a little bit because it just seems like we need to update this, and there's a few different considerations I think going into that. And then the voices at the table definitely include people who are concerned about land conservation and solar uses versus other uses or natural states and things like that. So that's definitely part of the conversation that's happening there as well. So I think more so we're not moving in a direction to that's going to require legal review.
Okay.
So much as it's going to be like updating zoning language and going through that process for now. And then based on that, then maybe, there'll be some further discussion and changes on how we move forward once that's done.
Okay. Yeah.
But certainly good to know that the attorney is there and available for things if needed. And the Dover Amendment's an interesting one to look at. I know the Florence Road issue came up at the last discussion on some level, but I didn't hear those terms or anything about that. So that's something.
It was pretty early on, and the neighborhood was well organized. And then you guys mentioned it earlier, like whoever was going to do it got bought by somebody else. So the project kind of went to a standstill, and we are now negotiating the pilot. And it was Cypress something, and I forget who it is now.
You're talking about 50 Florence Road?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, because that recently they tried to make a bunch of amendments, and the commission determined that they needed to get a new notice of intent. So they went through the process again recently and got the order of conditions. And I know that they reached out to the building department recently, trying potentially about getting started. So, but I'm not getting started necessarily, but they're reaching out to them. So
yeah.
Yeah, it's probably Cypress Creek originally, and then I don't know if they sold the project off to another developer at this point or something. Yeah, be interested to know who that is. But that's a good case study, I guess, for this type of thing, right? Where you how that land was chosen, and what restrictions are in place, or what's the neighborhood or the community is allowed to bring up, and what they just are sort of powerless to deal with.
Yeah, it surprised me.
Yeah, that is a little surprising, but maybe one of those well-intentioned things at the state level, like, oh, we just want to make sure solar is easy to do, and then the unintended consequences are that, well, communities no longer have a say on what's going in next door.
In terms of wetlands, the commission is bound to just the Wetlands Protection Act, since you don't have a wetlands ordinance for the city increasing any kind of purview or jurisdiction for the commission. So it met all the standards for the Wetlands Protection Act, at least.
I see. So is that something the city would want to consider, is like beefing that up or having something augmented on top of that for wetlands? Is that something that we did?
I think we should look at it. I'm always, even the ordinance, the original idea on the solar ordinance was concerning to me after what River Valley went through and the mill owners went through at the very beginning with solar. I think for the mill owners, it's changed drastically. Yeah. But I worry about that. I don't know how much I should worry about it. I'm not, but I think it's a good conversation to have, right? So people understand there's a balance. So if we put in this in force, then this is this is a result. And the thing I look at with a lot of these things is just what it unintentionally does to the acceleration of gentrification.
Right.
And we already have a problem with affordable housing developers, getting them to do it. I'm feeling good about the new schools. So, I mean, I love the idea, but I need to know more about those sort of things that I just mentioned.
Right. And I think on the other side too, there's the competing, not impeding, commerce in some way, or like making it harder for, from a permitting standpoint. I know installers and developers are, always concerned about what the process looks like, and make sure that it's clear cut, and that they don't have to, the easier they can make it, the more, you don't want to just rubber stamp stuff necessarily, but if they can be clear that reduces their costs, it makes it easier for them to do the work they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see the federal or state government do some kind of a tax offset. So and cities and towns are encouraged to beef up that language, but then there's an offset. I don't know, it goes into a housing trust or it goes right. I don't know how it would work, but especially if there are strong laws that allowed solar and developers to push, that it only makes it more harder for affordable housing. What the balance is. And right now we're at that precipice.
Right. Yeah. And unfortunately, right, so much with solar still so piecemeal for local communities and disparate from, county to county, state to state and everything. So yeah, it's hard for businesses to know, and to deal with that in some different jurisdictions. But that's good. Some good information to take back to the working group, certainly, as we continue the discussions there. Try to, at least get that part of the process going.
Yep.
So that's great. I'll at least get some good things to bring to that. Scott, we talked about, the Eversource account monitoring was on here, and we've kind of talked about that previously, and that's fallen with the Honeywell process. But Scott, do you have anything else that from your side of things that we haven't discussed already?
I don't think so. And actually 7:30 was kind of my deadline. So I'm ready to wrap if you all are.
Okay. Yeah. So, perhaps we've come up with an idea for, I don't know, some social media stuff out of this, depending on things we can talk about that a little bit further. Or Scott,
actually, one specifically to that, because Stephen let us know he's planning to step down. I think I should post that we are open for new members, and we can kind of use the social media to invite folks and, share that to the Easthampton group page.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. And even like maybe a listing of some of the things that we're currently, talking about and engaged in might give some specificity.
Right. So yeah, folks know what they might be getting into.
Yeah. So as far as process there, Stephen, and my apologies if I don't know this already, there an email or something in writing saying you're stepping down. And then,
so Mayor, just as far as my term ends at the end of the year.
Yes.
And so I was just planning on not renewing my term.
Okay.
So I was going to send you an email towards like November, December timeframe, and just as far as not renewing my term.
Okay.
What was going to be.
Because we can't post or ask for applicants until that term is ended. Like the person has said, okay, I don't want renewal, or, or I'm just stepping down because you're moving. It has to be posted at City Hall for 10 days. And once the 10 days start, then the social media outreach and the description of, what you guys are working on, I think would be fantastic.
Okay.
Okay. I will, then I'll send you that notification that I won't seek renewal at the end of my term. I'll do that sometime this week too, and then that'll start the clock. Okay.
Okay.
Great. While we're on that, I think I mentioned at the outset that Misty is our chair. Has been unfortunately unable to sort of fulfill her duties for a while. I know Marin was going to try to reach out to her. I don't know if anyone's actually heard from her. So, Mayor, somebody who hasn't been able to participate in the committee for a while, especially as chair. What's the process that we should follow with something like that?
So as far as chair, you can hold an election for a new chair with a quorum. I think it would be nice to let her know you're doing it, but that's,
yeah.
and then as far as participation, or concern that she's not attending, either like somebody like Maren can affirm like there's something going on, but she still wants to participate, or my office can reach out and say, hey, we've heard that, are you still interested in this? And follow. I typically do not unappoint people if they can't attend. I don't renew their term. If there was some behavior or something that was really egregious, I would move to unappoint them. But unless you guys are without quorum,
Okay.
and if it was going to be, if it affects the committee, the advisory board from effectively meeting, then I would get involved if she didn't want to voluntarily step down.
Right. Okay, that's good to know. I mean, it's nothing sinister or anything like that. Really, just wanted to understand. We have occasionally had quorum issues. So with only 5 people, every person counts quite a bit. So
Right.
Want to make sure that we're still able to.
So absolutely, yeah, I hear you. And on other committees that has happened, I get involved. Like I appointed them in the first place and check in with them again about the commitment. I mean, that's like, interest, but also do you understand the commitment to the committee?
Right. Okay. Good. Well, we'll hold off on the social media till we know that we're clear to start, listing Stephen's spot as being open for the future for next year. Anybody else? Stephen, Scott, anything else for new business going forward?
I'm all set.
Okay. Good. I think we've covered a lot. Definitely appreciate Mayor, you joining us and all your time tonight. Cassie, thank you for being here and participating and keeping us up to speed on some stuff as well and listening. I think I have a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
I make a motion.
All right, motion seconded.
Oh, sorry.
Good. Next meeting is we've set already for September 20th. 6 p.m. So we'll still be doing Zoom at that point. So we will see you all then. And good evening.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you very much, all of you, and Maren in absentia,
Yeah.
and Cassie for a great meeting. Truly.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. Bye.
Discussion tomorrow and hearing back from the finance committee on how everything goes with that.
Good night, everyone.
Okay, good night, Joel.
Thanks. Bye-bye.